Alright, so here is a B16 head off of a Honda Civic Del Sol. Any B16 would be the same. And you can tell that because it says PR3-1 right there. And I have taken this cylinder head and I have polished every intake and exhaust runner to where there's almost a mirror finish on the exhaust side. Every single part of the exhaust port. The roof, the floor, the divider, the sides. Every part of it has been polished up to, I'd say, something like 480 grit or so. Maybe a little beyond that. The finest one I have might be a little bit past that. But the idea is that the exhaust gases on their way out, they will have nothing to grab onto. They will have very little resistance once the blowdown cycle happens when the exhaust valves open and the high pressure inside the chamber is released just naturally by the exhaust valves opening, and the first wave of exhaust flows past the exhaust valve and out the exhaust port. And then after the blowdown period, you have the piston coming back on its way up, forcing the rest of the exhaust gases, hopefully all of the rest of the exhaust gases, on its way out. So this should help that. This cylinder head is going to be bolted to a reinforced cylinder support system block, and it will be under boost, so this should only help with performance airflow wise. This head should flow a little bit more than a stock B16 if I could imagine. And I am also lapping every single valve to its seat. You can see, let me show you the difference here. Yeah, let's see. Here, right here is a lapped exhaust valve seat. You can see that right where the valve meets the seat, there is a nice, even, consistent surface. There is nothing, there we go. There's nothing crazy going on. It's all a smooth, consistent surface. There's no pitting or whatever on either the valve, which is right there, next to an unlapped valve right there. And also here is a lapped versus unlapped valve seat. The exhaust seats, for whatever reason, maybe because of the extreme heat that they see, the exhaust valve seats look a whole lot worse than the intake valve seats. I'm going to contribute that to the heat that they see. But the pitting and everything, you can even almost feel it with your fingernail. Once I'm done, all of these will be lapped, and every valve will have its own special home. But the intake valve seats have already been done, so I can show you what those look like. There it is. Intake valve seats are done. The intake valves are lapped. Once they are lapped, they are stuck. They are married. Whatever valve you lapped into that seat is there, and it will only truly have a really good seal if you keep the valve with the seat. If you mix them up, you might be alright, but I wouldn't take the chance if you're already going this far. If you're not going to touch the seats and lap them or grind them or whatever, I would just keep whatever valves were in there in the same seats they were. If it was working before, it'll work after. But let me show you the intake side. Let's see what we got here. Yes, the intake side. So right here is the provision for the bung for the injector. So the injector is going to spray right along that section of the port right there into the airstream already on its way into the cylinder. So that's how you can easily identify the exhaust side from the intake side of a cylinder head, especially if it's a fuel injected engine, which you'd be hard pressed to find one today. But It's an easy way to tell if it has the protrusion for an injector. You know it is the intake side. But more importantly, let's look at the intake port more in depth here. The intake port, let's see, there we go, that's good. So, the floor of the intake port, I have left rather rough compared to the rest of the port. The sides and the roof of the port, I have polished as far as I can possibly go, and also with the bowls. The bowls of any runner is right after the valve guides before it gets to the valve seat. So the bowl is everything, the highly polished part of the port you can see after the valve guide before the valve seat. That's the bowl. The bowl is the number one area where you can gain airflow in porting a cylinder head, especially any stock cast cylinder head that has not been CNC'd, not been ported, not been touched. You are guaranteed to have casting lines, casting flashes on either side of the port where the two halves of the casting meet, and especially where the machining of the valve seat meets the casting of the actual cylinder head port itself. So when you blend those two together, that is where you're going to find the greatest gains. And I've done this with every single port. And the idea is that when you leave the port floor rough and you polish the sides and the roof of the port, the airspeed going through the port on the bottom is slower than the airspeed going through the top of the port. And this should create a tumbling effect of air into the cylinder, and under certain loads, throttle positions, RPMs, depending on a ton of different factors, it will either help or hurt. In this case, I hope help the fuel atomization on its way into the cylinder, and it also helps port velocity. So if you imagine every time the intake valves open on each cylinder, there's a pocket of air that's flowing very quickly through this port. Along the bottom, it's rough. Along the top, it's smooth. It will drag along the bottom and run very quickly across the top. So that will create a nice natural flow into the cylinder, and under low throttle position or medium throttle position and low to medium-ish load, it will create awesome air-fuel, homogeneous air-fuel mixtures for complete burn. And also just having the fact that these are polished, they will naturally flow more than an unpolished cylinder head. So it will help part throttle, low and medium load, and it also will help wide open performance. Total complete air, as much airflow as possible is the goal here for this build. So that is all I'm going to do with this cylinder head. In future videos, I will be showing you the block that this head will be bolted to, and then after that, once it's running, I will be showing you videos of just how the thing runs on low boost. But yeah, this is cylinder head porting 101.